All right. Hey, everybody. My name's Lainey Williams. If y'all want to introduce yourselves.
I'm Fatima Scott.
And Kenzie Miller.
All right. So I'm going to go first, if that's okay. I've kind of chosen to go over curriculum and then probably more focused on the assessment piece. So in my district, we use TEKS resource system. I don't know if you're familiar. Let me actually get it loaded and then I'll share my screen and kind of show you some of the resources and things it has in it. I will say that as our school kind of adopted into that, the word fidelity is used, right? We are using it with fidelity. Let me see if I can share now. So I do think that TEKS resource system is great. Can y'all see that?
Yes.
Okay, so I do think that TEKS resource system has some really good stuff in it. So I teach 8th grade math, so I just went ahead and pulled up 8th grade math to look at. Grade level 8 math, you can see it has all of this down here. So it has your vertical alignment documents. So where you can click it and it's going to have everything and every TEK and standard, like paced out all the way down as well as above. So it goes all the way down to 3rd grade, but it also goes up to algebra and geometry, which is good resources there. This is a really good one, enhanced TEKS clarification. So this is where teachers can go in. I think it's especially helpful to those that maybe aren't as familiar with their standards, to be able to go in and understand the TEKS. Where I start having some problems with TEKS resource system and the fidelity part is I do not agree with their YAG that they have created, especially in the math department. Some things just don't make sense. My biggest peeve with 8th grade is if you notice that unit 2, so a whole unit, and it doesn't even contain a readiness standard. I made my case to my principals and to our instructional coach. I even made a whole PowerPoint presentation on why I disagreed with this and how I wanted it, but I was shot down with fidelity. So anyways, what I really kind of wanted to focus on though is the assessments and how we're doing assessments at my school, like unit assessments, and really what I think that we could probably do to make these better. So I think I said before, this is my 6th year at this school. The first year that I worked here was a complete shock to me. There was no set curriculum for math. We're talking about, I was teaching 7th grade lab, so like intervention, 8th grade intervention, 8th grade regular class, 7th grade pre-algebra, and the Algebra 1 course, all in my first year. Yes. And the only curriculum they had was for the 8th grade, and the principal was like, but nobody really uses those books. They usually just do their own thing. I don't really know what that means, but okay. Anyways, it was rough that first year. But that year, they had also kind of, as a whole district, changed their assessment process. So every campus had an instructional coach. So a person designated as the instructional coach, which I thought, okay, that's good. That's the person I go to kind of help with lesson planning, right? No, that person's job was basically to create our unit test for us. This was the first district I had been in that teachers weren't in the process of creating tests. I had only been in 2 other districts, but I was like, wait, you just make the test? And they're like, yes. And I was like, can you explain that to me? Because the district I came from, we were heavily involved. Teachers actually made most of their tests. Yes, they worked with the instructional coaches and with our curriculum directors, but the teachers were ultimately the ones that were responsible for, digging into the data, creating those assessments, justifying why they were choosing, all of that stuff. And they were like, well, we kind of had some issues with, when teachers make their tests, well, then their, scores and things don't line up at the end. I'm like, okay, so isn't that the instructional coach's job to step into? It's kind of what my question was. And they were like, yeah, but this is how we're going to do this to kind of align everybody back. Okay, all right. Anyways, I had issues with that. I definitely asserted myself into the instructional coach's office pretty much every unit and sat down with her, and we created our test together. I just think that it's ridiculous to think that one person can create, we're talking about, so one person on a campus at this time creates every single unit test for every core subject. I'm only on grades 7 and 8, but and the person obviously wasn't a math person either. She was like, I don't know, you tell me, you know. Anyways, we've kind of moved a little bit. We've made a little bit of progress, a little bit. We actually, in some ways, I should say, we don't have an instructional coach on every campus now. There are 2 instructional coaches for the district. There's like a elementary one and then a secondary one. They are still responsible for creating the unit test for every subject, every grade level, all, yes. What we've improved on, and I've made my case very well known, is actually working with the teachers to like get the teachers involved in this process. I'm like, you know, I think my biggest things is if the teachers are never creating their test and they're never looking at that side of it, how can you expect them to know their TEKS well? You know, they need to understand the rigor. They need to align their instruction. But if they're never in that side or in that process, I just don't see how that can happen. So the suggestions that I've made to them is, you know, give us an approved bank of questions. You know, we use Eduphoria. You can make it accessible as like certain questions to teachers. You know, give us an approved list of questions for teachers to go in and build a test, or have the teachers build a test and the instructional coach, you know, have to give it the okay, the go ahead. And then the other one that I really wish that we would pick up is let the teachers have autonomy on their unit assessments, but sure, let the instructional coaches make, you know, periodic like checkpoints, you know, every 9 weeks, every semester, every whatever you want it to be. That's kind of what I wish that we would move towards. But I would love to hear kind of like, what is y'all's process at your schools for assessments, like specifically teacher assessments like unit tests?
Well, I'll say that I'm in a small district just like you, just south of you, and our structure is very, very similar to that. Our instructional coaches still make all of our 9 weeks tests, any test that we count, they make. We don't make them at all. And they also do our lesson plans for us, and they do our scope and sequence. They do everything.
Wow.
Half of the time we're just warm bodies, and granted, that's fantastic when you are a brand new teacher and you're kind of learning the standards and you're seeing how everything kind of comes together. But for people that have been a teacher for several years, it can get really frustrating because you're kind of limited in what you're able to do. And while we are vertically aligned, I wish we had a layout system like you showed earlier, because you're able to actually, it looked like you're able to click on the vertical alignment and see a step up and a step down and see, you know, what they should know, what you're supposed to be on, and what they will need to know. It would make it easier, even in first grade. I know you're in 7 and 8, I'm in first, but starting young with a basic foundation is key to success in 7th and 8th. And that's where we're missing so many foundational skills. So I feel like we need to take these skills that we've put for 7th and 8th, and even the outline, the curriculum, the scope and sequence, all of those things, and kind of transfer it down, because we treat first grade in public school like pre-K. And it is astounding of the standards or the lack of standards that we have. And then Lainey runs into problems later when they have like zero subitizing skills or no number sense and all of those things. So unfortunately, I have no words of wisdom, but I will tell you that in small districts, it's very, very normal.
Yeah, I can't necessarily relate. Like we were talking prior, all of our curriculum is given to us, kind of like Kinsey. Even down to like the slide decks in our PowerPoints. Like teachers really don't have the autonomy to alter. All of our assessments are online based. So someone from district that's sitting in the back office creates that, and is just pushed out to all of the campuses. And I want to say Houston ISD has 276 campuses. So there is a curriculum team that's handling it, but there's no integration, like you said, like teachers being able to alter or see the data and be able to go back and do a reteach or add certain components from, unit one. And, I might add one or two questions to this unit to, gauge if it's a building skill. So yeah, unfortunately, but I do hear that that's very common. Like my mom works at a very
Mhm.
small district, and I was like, what about an instructional coach? She didn't even know what that was. So her school doesn't even have an instructional coach. I think your suggestions on being able to at least work with the instructional coach. I know I worked out in another district. Each continent had their own instructional coach, and for PLCs, like every 1 to 2 weeks, they would sit down and actually break down those, exit tickets
See, I
or
love.
those.
I think I really like that idea better than kind of
Yeah.
what we have, because like I said, so the one person that we did have, she was a previous science teacher, so she was great in science.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't help me in math.
It didn't help at all.
So I do like
Mm-hmm.
the idea of like you said, kind of a subject. You also reminded me of going back around to what I was talking about. My first year having 5 preps, no real curriculum or any really materials. I was on my own. I pretty much wrote my own Algebra 1 curriculum from bits and pieces. It was rough. Okay. We did very well. I will say that. It was an honors class. But kind of on a positive side, after the year was over and I sat down with my principals again and was like, look, this can't keep happening. They did let me give them the suggestions. I showed them all the resources I wanted, and they did purchase those for me. So that was a good part. I do think that's something that we've gotten better at. Like, I don't know if y'all are familiar with the science TSIP all changed this coming school year.
Mm-hmm.
And so they sent our science teachers to like an expo. They got to go meet with the different, companies, the different ones, and kind of get their spills on why you should, buy from them. I actually conducted a PLC in a previous class for them specifically, and we talked about the pros and cons of each of those. And I think the district really did take their, suggestions and what they wanted when they decided and adopted our new curriculum. So I think we are making some positive steps that way as far as listening to teachers and what they prefer or what they need. So that side, I think we're doing okay on. But
Well, just to kind of piggyback off of math, if I may, Miss Fatima. All right. I'm going to go ahead and share. I did create just a small PowerPoint so I can organize my thoughts because I have no mind by this time of the year. So once I get that up, I will show you. So this was actually our last year. Hold on. The internet may be slow. Our house and everything around us is currently like completely flooded. So the internet naturally slow.
oh no.
Have you guys got all the storm? Bonham has to have, right?
Yes.
Okay. Are you able to see my screen or no?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see. Some things I like to do is just to let everybody know what a PLC is, not to say everything personally. Of course, we're in kind of a different format for a PLC, so that's not necessarily necessary, but it's a slide that I copy and paste. Just lets people know that we are here to help each other. But what we are going to talk about is TEMI. This is our last year, or this was our last year of our TEMI test. After this, we're moving to MAP, so it'll be a completely different process for us. But there have been a lot of issues with recording TEMI tests because it's all for the teacher to record. So we give the test in our classroom 3 times a year, beginning of year, middle of year, end of year. And we're responsible for grading and scoring and submitting our scores. We do, I saw eyebrows go up. We do turn in our hard copies to our testing coordinator, but none of mine have ever been questioned, so I'm unsure if they do look through them or not, but we do turn in the hard copies. I'm assuming it's because they're looking for discrepancies if something ever arises. However, the TEMI test just measures math fluency and magnitude comparisons, place values, number sequences, addition and subtraction combinations, and it's for grades K through, or actually just first and second. Some things that we do see happen that I witnessed this past year is that teachers are not timing the sections accurately. So when you're not timing a section accurately, you are naturally inflating your numbers, whether it's the practice section or the actual testing section, which leads to inaccurate scoring, of course. Students are not allowed to start before the timer, or the test has to be recorded as invalid and you'll have to retest. And they have to stop as soon as they hear the timer. Something I do is before the test, they're holding their pencil in the air so they're not tempted, because I'm, again, with first grade, we all know that they want to doodle and write all the things. And then as soon as that timer goes off, I have them drop their pencil. They think it's fun to drop their pencil anyway, so that kind of gets them to just stop. Even if they're halfway writing through the number. And then if they haven't finished the number, that doesn't count. And that's another issue we've had. Also, having to actively monitor our class. So this is not a test where we should be sitting at our desk just with a timer and just verbally letting our students, start, stop. This is something we need to walk through our classroom. We need to have the timer on us so that everybody is able to hear as we are walking by or wherever it beeps. Kids are looky-loos. They're going to look, and we need to be there to make sure that the guys are on their own paper and that they are being responsible, and we're responsible for their actions. And actually, the biggest issue that I've noticed with the TEMI is that if a student skips a problem, the assessor or the teacher that's scoring needs to stop counting for points. And for a lot of teachers this year, that just because they skipped one, they skipped number 3, but they continued on 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. However, after number 3, the rest of them shouldn't be counting because they have a break in the test. And these things are outlined in the teacher manual for the TEMI, but that is a long and in small print. So that is why having them on big slides and having a meeting right before the TEMI test would be advantageous for teachers. Again, that just leads to naturally inflating those scores, and essentially it might help the teacher because we are a TIA district. However, all of our goals should be student success and actual student learning, and we are not able to go back and reassess the TEKS if we think that they are all doing phenomenal. Here are the TEMI TEKS. So our addition, subtraction, combinations TEK is apply basic fact strategies, add and subtract within 20, and they are mixed up within the TEMI. So students have to know what addition means and what subtraction means and how to identify that quickly. We have a a place value TEK, and they need to recognize instantly the quantity of structured arrangements. This is just like tens blocks. Our magnitude comparisons using place value to compare the whole numbers. So they're given 2 numbers side by side in a box, and they have to circle the smaller or the larger number depending on the instructions of the TEMI. And then our number sense, TEK, I can't speak. Reciting numbers forwards and backwards between any given numbers. So it might be 1 blank 2 or 1 blank 2, 1 blank 3, 53, 54 blank, and it can go up or down, and they just have to circle the correct number. Now, the reason I brought up the TEKS is because our instructional coaches in our district have given us a curriculum map, and the curriculum map is broken down by weeks. And once you open up a weekly lesson plan, you can go day by day and see all of the goals. You can see all of the TEKS. You can see the language. You can see the books that you should be reading or, to enrich. It also does give intervention techniques and sometimes even links to outside sources that the teacher can use either for intervention or for enrichment, or even just fun added activities that can go with the TEKS for math. Goals for our TEMI should be that by the end of the year, 80% of first grade students will reach a raw total score of 78 or greater. And that's with all of the sections added up. Students will be able to correctly answer 16 equations within the addition, subtraction, combination portion of the TEMI with the allotted 2 minutes. The addition, subtraction combinations tend to be the most difficult just because it requires the most brain power because you're switching from addition to subtraction. And they're also required to write the number in the correct space. So that just goes back to grading the test correctly. If students are writing the answer above the math problem because it's vertical math, then it should not be counting. It needs to be under the final line. And we are allowed to give instruction on this. And there's also that practice section with completely outlined instructions and directions for the teacher to read to students. And it does hit all of these points. There are just these very big discrepancies that are still being seen. And in all honesty, I'm shocked that teachers are allowed to grade their own tests when it comes to, qualifying for TIA. I feel like there's a lot of room to be invalid. And I honestly can't believe that the testing is so lax in grades K through 2. They're completely dependent on the honesty of a teacher. And unfortunately, when you're within a TIA district, while we all have good intentions, the bonuses start getting to people. And the fact that they feel entitled to a bonus also starts getting to teachers. And whenever you offer some type of monetary compensation for doing your job, it really leads to this vicious downhill cycle, which is why every 3 to 5 years there's a new system, to give teachers incentive to be better educators. Unfortunately, we haven't kind of found one that works yet. And so we're stuck in this spiral. I am hoping that with MAP, it is different because it is student-based, it's computer-based. So there's not a lot of room for teachers to kind of change the scores. From what I hear, at least, I'm, again, not familiar with it. And yeah, I'm hoping that it's going to change a lot of things within our district. Do you have any tips or tricks? I think you both use MAP. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Both use MAP. So when you are doing MAP, because we'll have it for reading, language arts, and math. I mean, I'm a little unsure how the little ones do math on the computer, but if you've seen it, please let me know because I'm very clueless, but I want to know. And that's part of my senior projects. I'm almost done with this program is I'm creating like a PLC template and how to interpret the data that's going to be coming out with MAP. So I'll be working with our instructional coach and my principal to kind of lay out something so the teachers don't feel like they're thrown into a brand new system with no guidance. Because honestly, I feel like that's where we get these inflated scores because nobody feels like anybody's watching. Nobody actually knows how to do anything. We all just assume that everyone understands rules. So
I can contest. This is our first year in my district that we are using MAPS, and it's completely different. It's not necessarily timed. I think for K through second for math, it's estimated the test should take about 30 to 40 minutes for the students. And it is, of course, and I want to say it's a lot of questions though. If I remember correctly, I want to say it's close to 35 to 40 questions.
Wow.
It will scale and meet the student where it's at. So if you are looking for there's not specific TEKs. So for instance, your first grader could jump down to a kindergarten TEK, or they could bump up to a second grade TEK because it will find their margin and it will kind of ping them. So you will quickly know like kind of where your students are if they're below grade level or above grade level. That's the one thing that I kind of don't like about MAPS, because if you are, for instance, upper grade, like third grade, and you want a really specific TEK, it's not guaranteed that that student will see it. So they all start on the same level for beginning of the year, but middle or end, you're seeing Johnny going through it and you're like, okay, like he's doing great. He may actually be on the first grade TEK. And that's why he's performing so well. Or you see one of your higher kids, you're like, okay, well, your score is not moving too much. Well, it's because they're on the second grade teach. So you can't really hone in and say, okay, I need to do more small group on regrouping or more on place value. It's kind of is the students can pop anywhere on the spectrum, unfortunately.
Do you feel like that's advantageous? Do you feel like that's good for the students and for the teacher? Because I feel like that would be a little confusing and a little bit contradicting to classroom instruction.
It is. I know, like we utilize the data specifically for the upper grades to see how they're going to, if they're going to do meets masters approach for STAR.
Yeah.
However, for our younger students, it's a little bit harder for, like, I know I'm thinking of my first grade teacher. She has over 28 students in her class. So during intervention is a lot. She in her intervention time is only a 20-minute block. So when she looks at her data, she's having to decide, okay, do I pull my student that is, maybe on the borderline of first and second? Do I really get the kid that's first grade? It's hard to do true RTI or even just reteach. And I'll go into our curriculum later. It's really hard. I would say for the upper grades, it's a little bit easier to kind of see where they fall, but for lower, no.
I'll say, so coming from a junior high perspective, I do agree that it does usually give a pretty accurate representation, like you said, of approaches meets masters. For me specifically, like my personal opinion, I feel like there's better assessments to give me more, because like you said, it's a placement test, right? So I have 8th graders, and it tells me where they're placed. So it tells me at what grade they're, and I'm like, okay, but I'm still responsible for the 8th grade standards, the 8th grade test that they're taking, and there are some really good breakdowns by student, but there's a ton of reports that MAP can give you. And they're usually pretty good at their trainings. I had to attend several. There are some good trainings to kind of go through those. I don't know if there's a training that can get you through all of them, because there's so many reports that it gives, which that part is good. But for me, like I said, so when I have an 8th grade student who's at a 5th grade level, I do understand that, and we've got to do intervention, but it's not really helping me necessarily with my standards, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does.
I kind of wanted to go back to something you were saying. So in your TIMI test, so the teachers are getting paid based off of the student's performance?
So for a TIA district, yes, essentially we combine our TPRI and TEMI test, and the students have to, meet a certain level based on whichever grade it is, and whatever percentage meets, not growth. So whatever percentage meets this level, it has to be above, I believe, I want to say 56%, so above 56%, and then it goes tiered. So yes, essentially teachers can get compensated, because we're a TIA district, based on the percentage of students combined with a bunch of other factors for performance. And a lot of things go into it, like your leadership, attendance, your observations, and your student performance. Those are all
okay. Well, I was going to ask, was this the only thing that there are others? No. That's interesting
but it's
to
a
me.
Huge part. And if we're not being honest about our scores,
I will say, as far as MAP, there's not gonna, unless they're just literally standing over the student's shoulder, telling them that sort of thing. There's not room for teacher discretion. Like, it's a computerized, they take the test. I will say, because my district has been using MAP for at least, at my grade level, the past 5 years, for everybody, like all grade levels. I think this was the 2nd year that we went all the way down to elementary, all the way up through high school. What I'm noticing, because they've taken these several years now, students are like, oh, on the beginning of the year, because we're looking for growth, and that's what we kind of are preaching to them, is we want to see growth. We want to see you grow. We're looking for you to grow. Some of them will be like, so if I don't do very good on this one, the first one, it's going to look really good later. And then, of course, we still just have to pull up those reports and say, look, you dropped this much from last year. So that part's good because it shows you, like I can pull up one of my students and it's going to show you from 3rd grade all the way to now, and it gives you a graph showing kind of what levels they reached, beginning, middle, end. So that's nice.
In our district, that we have like a chart, and I'm not sure if it's a map chart or if like a HISD thing, but like for instance, it was like, okay, for our 3rd graders for science, this is what their score should be for beginning, middle of year. So what we do is like, okay, at the beginning of the year, all right, friend, you were supposed to get 130, you were at 115, so so that's how we're kind of like, okay, this child is not ready for
like a goal setting sheet.
Yes.
Yeah, we do that too.
Yeah.
So before they ever take it, pull up those previous scores. Okay, so what's a realistic goal that you're shooting for, and kind of celebrating the kids that way.
Well, I'm excited for the differences. It's going to be an interesting year for sure.
It will, and I would say like the actual like giving the assessment is not hard. Depending on your district, either you'll have to set up your session or your testing coordinator will set up the session, and you just go in. You're gonna pop up your laptop. You're gonna open up the session. The kids, all they have to do is put the session name in there, and then the passcode. They click their name, and then you click start test. You get to monitor and kind of see which kiddo is going through. If a child is guessing, I want to say after the 6th question, depending on how fast they're going, it's going to completely lock them out of the test. So you get to go and say like, hey, I go take a water break, hey, what's going on? Like it won't allow them to just speed through the test. Like it will lock it and then you have to unlock it on your portal. Yes. Well, so I kind of like that because, they can't just go do and get done. So.
We have a lot of those. Yeah, so that's awesome. Thank you for that, ladies.
Of course. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and talk about curriculum. So I kind of hinted that curriculum this year for HISD looks a little different. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, so we use Canvas. This is our homepage that everyone goes to. This is a mandatory site that we have bookmarked. So of course you have your elementary, secondary. For this reason, I'm going to elementary. And when I pull it up, it's broken down by grade level. If it will load. So for this one, let's just do 3rd grade. I go to 3rd grade, and then I'm even deeper. I can pick math, my science. We do science of reading in this district, which is something new that we started doing this year. For this example, we're just going to go to read write. So here is the magic. So they used to give us a curriculum map, like on this day you teach this. They've gone to a very general just unit. Here are the TEKS for this unit. Make sure it aligns. So everyone on their curriculum map, when you walk into a classroom, there's a clipboard with all of the curriculum maps for that unit and for that day. And then we have like a little sticky note. So like, for instance, if I'm going in and supporting a teacher or I'm doing an observation, I can, I'm looking at the board, they have their learning objectives, they have the demonstration of learning, and then I look at their clipboard, I'm like, okay, I can dive even deeper. So it's not necessarily lesson plans, it's just a curriculum map. We're down here, like I said, everything is given to us. So we have our slide decks, our demonstration of learning. We do something that's called an LSAE. Our math block, it is 90 minutes. So the first 30 minutes, it is direct instruction using the slide deck. We have an exit ticket, which is what we call DOL. That's only 10 minutes. It's 5 questions and it's directly to what was just taught in that 30-minute block. Based on that, so the teacher, we have to actively grade during that time. So as a student is finishing the question, we're going around and we're checking, X, or we're checking it off. Based on that, the student gets scored either an L. An L stands for learning. S means securing 1. We have securing 2 and advance. So advance are those kids who got 5 out of 5. And then our learnings, just to put it in perspective, either they got 0 to 2 questions correct. This is the last 45 minutes of that time block, we separate the kids. So if you got an advance or a securing two, that means you are able to demonstrate that you are able to independently practice the skill. We have a place in our campus, which used to be the library, but now it's called the Team Center, where we have an instructional coach that's in there and they are doing independent practice. Everyone else is back in class, and this is your reteach or your intervention time. And I use intervention time loosely because you're basically going back over your slide deck, and there's a packet with practice questions. So one thing I will say, I do enjoy having this because I've seen several teachers who cannot make a PowerPoint to save their life, and they're just sitting there throwing teaks at the students. But I also, on the flip side, I do not like this format because it takes away the autonomy for the teachers. And I'm going through this just so that you can see. We do have to put timers in there. We utilize multi-response strategies, so think pair share, ripple rounds, choral response, whiteboards, etc. But this, besides adding multi-response strategies and timers, teachers are not allowed to alter this PowerPoint. And so here's our learning objectives and our DOLs. These have to be posted on your board, like written each day. But and it this program we utilize, this is reading. I'm sorry, I said math, but this is reading. We utilize Amplify, and I think Amplify is for our kids is very advanced in HISD, specifically at my school. A lot of my fifth graders are not at a fifth grade level, so they're reading Shakespeare, and we're still learning how to decode, our CVCs, silent E's. It's not. We're kind of glossing over that and forcing the kids to be reading poetry and writing these full essays when we're missing the basic foundation. So, like I said, the curriculum is new to us this year. However, and this format is very new. Something that I will say is a bonus. I don't hear teachers complaining about having to do lesson plans, and having to spend a lot of time. On Thursdays we used to have our lesson plans due. You have to drop them in the SharePoint, and is none of that because this is across the board. Every single school in HISD that has a third grade class is doing the same exact lesson on that same day. So it's uniform across the board, which I do like because and the resources are the same. I'll put a pin in that. I do have another comment on that. But it's the same. So if I have a first year teacher versus a 20-year teacher, they're teaching the same content. Their exit ticket is the same. Now, where we see a difference is the small group on those and how are they able to teach in that small group. That is altered. Teachers don't have to create their own answer key. It's there. So I will say some of that weight that we know that teachers do outside of school or during our planning has been removed. Going back to the resources, something that I really wish, and I did pitch this to the district, but I don't think they're ready for it yet, is creating an additional tab that gives the teachers the correct supplemental aids that they need for that lesson. I know on my campus, for instance, this year, I am the only case manager and I had over 40 something students in my class. The district expectation was that I am supposed to go and review every single DOL, LSAE across like all of my grade levels and give that to that teacher. As much as I tried to do that, I know that it fell on, I missed some kids. So we have a curriculum team. How about having a special population representative for our English learners or our special ed kids that we're already putting everything here? Why not go ahead and put that graphic organizer? Or why not go ahead and put the multiplication chart, your place value charts already there for the teachers because it helps out the campus because my resources look a lot different than a first year special education teacher. I've been doing this for years. There's things I found There's things teachers from generations before me passed down that I find useful that I have in my pocket, and somebody else may not. So if we're gonna do uniform and equity type teaching, I think that is a big component that is needed. Something else, the kids got really smart. The DOLs, they'll leave them blank. Some of the DOLs, and I can show you one. There will be like a response where they have to do like 2 to 3 sentence response. Yeah, the students will leave it blank on purpose because they do not want to write. So the district has not came up with a solution on saying like, hey, what do we do for these students that are not right? Well, this is probably not, excuse me, not the best example, but these passages are long. One, the students are expected to read this independently. That did not happen this year. But see, these the free response, some students would leave it blank, and they decide not to answer because they're like, oh, I don't want to write today. Like this, based on today's read out loud, what is one thing you know about them all? They'll leave it blank because our grading system, even if you get 4 out of 5, you still get to go to the team center and do an independent work. You don't have to stay for small group. Or some students say, okay, well, I'm just going to stay for small group, and they just rip up the DOL because they're like, it doesn't mean anything. Based on our grades, it is a grade for the students. They will take an average. So every Monday through Friday, you're doing a DOL. It's just an average of that. So students really don't feel the pressure to turn in work anymore because they're like, oh, you're just going to do the average. It's fine. Or, oh, I know you only do one LSAE every 3 weeks, so I'm just not going to do the other 2 packets. And us as teachers, we want, of course, our students to pass. So if I notice, okay, the kids didn't do so well on the Unit 3 LSAE, well, then I'm just going to pick a different grade to put in the grade book. So some of our grades are not matching the ability of the students because it's not a consistent measure. Like I said, I really do like that everything's given there. You don't have to go searching. You don't have to try to find everything is vertical line because the curriculum writers did it that way. I will say it's been a trial and error. We've had some very inappropriate readings. One was talking about very sexual activities. We were on the news for it because it's a lot of work for the curriculum writers. And so I think they were honestly using like AI to get some of these passages and questions. There has to be a check and balance. If we're going to use Amplify, it needs to be amplified passages. It doesn't need to be randomized. So yeah, that's I have to say we're spoiled, and I tell some of the teachers, I was like, you're spoiled because I remember having to spend hours writing my lesson plans. But it's up to the teacher to still internalize the lesson and the unit because I've did an observation on a teacher where you can tell he just opened the slide that morning and had no clue what was on the slide at all. That's the curriculum that we're utilizing. I think they're going to try to keep it for this format for the next 4 years. We'll see, but yeah.
So I have some questions.
Yes.
So how long have you said that? How have y'all been using this?
Just since the beginning of this year.
Just this year, and it's at all grade levels.
Yes, all grade levels. Physics, algebra, everything.
Everything. Okay, that's interesting. You said that they go to small groups, so if they're not, if they don't do well on the exit ticket, they go to small. Is that the only time that teachers have like designated just like for intervention? So,
yes.
Okay. So like we're talking about like math and these other assessments. So when I see a student, okay, as a class, we didn't do well on whatever, there's not like going to be another day where we're going to hit that again. Like as far as
no, unfortunately, no. Towards the end of this year, they started trying to add flex days. So Friday would be like a flex day. But sometimes the flex day is not every Friday. So for instance, if it was 2 units ago, I noticed my students were struggling. I, as a teacher, have to remember, okay, on the next flex day, so if this was January that they did bad and our next flex day is not till April, I have to, remember, I'll have to go back or I have to piece it together because we're getting close to STAR tests. And like, yes, I really need to work on fractions, but right now they're really not getting, so division or something. It's kind of hard. So I wish that they would do every Friday as a flex day, so that at least you have 4 days of that instruction, and then that Friday you can have your entire 90-minute block to utilize as you see forth. But yes, no, our intervention time, only K through second have built-in intervention times. We have master schedules that are given to us from the district. But even then, K through second only gets a 20-minute block for interventions. That's it. Our upper grades, there is no interventions. Unfortunately, the House Bill 1416, where like if a student fails a STAR test, they are supposed to get 15 to 30 hours. Well, that looks a lot different here because in that small group, that 30-minute block, a teacher can claim and say, well, Johnny did small group intervention, so I'm going to count that 30 minutes towards the House bill. And it's like, no, like you didn't even touch on what Johnny needs. You just did like a general reteach. So if you have the entire class, I don't think that's small group. If no one left my classroom and I still have 25 kids, that's not small group in my opinion. Everyone's still at their desk. Everyone still has paper, like a paper packet. No one has manipulatives. We're not, there's no interaction. It's like as if the lesson just continued. So
I will say that your system has the possibilities to be amazing. However, again, there's too much left on teachers to actually carry out. And it's kind of brought to light the issue that we've caused by our lack of expectations for students is that we've created the achievement gap within students because younger grades, K through 2, I mean, I am not one of them because my background is in private school, but public school teachers, in my experience for K2, expect their kids to do nothing. Like we treat them like they are in pre-K up until they're in 3rd grade and expected to STAR test all of a sudden. So we never gave them a foundation. So when they get to 5th grade and they need all of this RTI and intervention, that teacher doesn't have time to go back to 1st grade or wait for an April flex day to teach 1st grade all over again.
Exactly.
So again, it brings to light all the issues that we've created by changing our curriculum and changing our expectations without ever getting down to the fundamental issue, which is student learning and these gaps. Like Fatima, you can't teach 5th grade if they don't know CVC words.
Exactly.
That is literally impossible. And the fact that we push kids through at that level is insane because then they go to Lonnie and they don't know 2 + 2 and they're expected to do long division and pre-algebra. So, I mean, while all of our systems have their advantages and their disadvantages, we're starting to uncover the underlying issue, which is that there's just too much going on because people that aren't in the classroom are creating the systems.
Yes.
So, ding, ding, ding. I mean, there's nothing else to say about it because we can only do what we can do in our classroom and count the hours that we know count and document what we need and do our RTI process the best that we know how. And we're given what we technically need. We're just not given the right path to do it all the time.
I agree. All right. So yeah, I appreciate y'all sharing, your assessments and all of like your processes of your curriculum. Like Kinsey said, like we are at 3 different districts, but we're able to see the same pattern, as we progress. So, but I thank you guys for the feedback. and listening.
It has been wonderful to get different perspectives and point of views. So yes, thank you, ladies.
Yeah, thank y'all.
All right. Thank you, ladies.
Bye.
Bye.